Hello, everybody. This is Barry Chase from ChaseLawyers, and today we're going to be talking to all you would-be series producers about how to mount and possibly get on the air your own reality TV series. So stay tuned. So at this point, mostly everyone knows that reality TV has become its own sort of category of TV series. People like them, whether or not you've become a fan of one or another of them. People seem to like them because they either like to watch people acting out the way they do, or because they like to watch other people making fools of themselves. Either way, reality TV has become a favorite of the networks, which also love them because they're relatively cheap to produce. And so we're likely to see more and more. And whatever your idea is, let's see if we can figure out a route to take it from here to there. Well, obviously, if you want to evaluate the chances of success of your own concept, you want to look at other preceding series that may have been similar or may have had similar fact situations or possibly similar personalities involved. So you want to check out and you want to see which ones have worked. Obviously, the ones that worked are the ones that are going to be most appealing to networks and possible co-producers. We'll get into that later. So you want to at least look at that. The second thing you have to ask yourself, and you have to be brutal about this, is, excuse me, do I have hot personalities? Do I have personalities which people will be interested in watching? Even if you've got a fairly interesting fact situation, like a sports situation or let's say a sexy situation, unless the people that are involved have that certain X factor which jumps off the screen and other people want to watch, you're unlikely to succeed. TV continues to be a personality medium. It always has been. People want to feel comfortable or interested in the people that are on the screen in the living room or the kitchen or wherever else. And so that's something you've got to be very brutal about. Something else you got to be brutal about is whether people other than your mother like your concept. One of the problems you have, and it's sort of self confirmation, I guess is what it is that you'll explain this to your friends and relatives and they'll all go, oh boy, that sounds great. It may be different if you're asking them for an investment, and we'll get into that in a minute. But as long as you just float your series idea and it's yours and they all love you and they all know you and they would love to see you on TV, everyone will say it's great. But you've really got to go outside your comfort circle, relatives and friends that already love you, and float it by some people who have no particular stake in making you feel good. If they like it, if a preponderance of them still like it, then you're going to go on to the next question, which is whether they're willing to invest in it and whether or not that indicates that you've got a possible winner on your hands. Well, we just talked a little about the kinds of people that you have to bounce your concept off of. In other words, you want to go outside people who are emotionally invested in you in the first place and who will therefore be predisposed to want to see you succeed, want to see their friend on the air, all that stuff. So the same crowd, the emotionally invested crowd, is the crowd you should go to initially for dollar investment in what you're doing. Now, you ask when you should start doing this, and I say right from the get-go. You have to have gathered at least sort of mid-five-figure money to have a realistic shot of being able to do those things you got to do to enhance your chances to actually get on the air with your series concept. Without the money, every decision that you're going to make through this entire process will be distorted because you'll have to cover the rent on Friday. You want to be able to make decisions for a longer term than just this Friday. So it is very important to start right away. And you start right away with the friends and relatives, your Aunt Tilly, who may have, an extra $5,000 or $10,000 she can throw your way. You've got to have agreements with these people so they know how they're going to get paid back if you are successful. And you also have to make sure that they understand that just because they give you $5,000 or $10,000 doesn't mean that they get to run your show. So there are certain written agreements you ought to go see a lawyer about, but that's who you should start with, these people who are emotionally invested in you. Now, another argument for why you need the money. It looks easy to make TV. Everyone sits there and goes, well, I could do that. But really, you probably couldn't. It is complex. There are a lot of professional tricks that professionals have. And if it was that easy to do, everybody would be doing it. So make sure that you've got your war chest of money before you launch off onto this mysterious adventure, and it'll make things a lot less difficult. Let's put it that way. Now we're getting into the lawyers part of this thing, because protection of intellectual property is what we do at Chase Lawyers, and it's what intellectual property lawyers do, is they try to protect their clients' intellectual property. Intellectual property is real property, and it runs from something you may write to describe what your series is going to be, all the way to the series itself, which is intellectual property, which is going to be owned by somebody and can't just be used by anybody for purposes of making money. So how do you protect it? Well, the first thing you should know is you can't protect your concept. As such, it's clear from the Copyright Act that you can't own an idea. And why is that? Why can't you own an idea? Well, for example, if you could own the idea of boy meets girl, boy screws up, girl leaves the boy worked like mad for the next few months or years or decades even, wins the girl back, and they live happily ever after. Now, if you could own that idea, no one else could ever produce a romantic comedy, because that's basically what all romantic comedies are about. So you can't own an idea, but you can own the expression of the idea. And as soon as you have something on paper, and I do urge you to start writing down the concept, both as a check on your own romance with the concept, because as you write it, you may find, gee, there isn't as much here as I thought there was. But even more importantly, to write out the special features of your concept and actually register that with the United States Copyright Office, because parts of it may be unique to the extent that they actually can't be copied, even though they're part of what you might consider your idea. In other words, the line between ideas, which you cannot own, and the expression of an idea, which you can own, which you do own if you're an author or any other creative person, that line is not as clear as we would like it to be, as you would like it to be. So register what you've got as soon as you can write something down, and do write it down. Now, the other basic way of protecting your idea is what are called non-disclosure agreements, non-disclosure, non-circumvention agreements. Again, you may need a lawyer for this, but basically they say with anyone you're working with, whether it's the investors that we talked about in the last segment or somebody else that you must work with, that you have a non-disclosure agreement signed by them before you disclose to them some of the details of your concept. So non-disclosure agreements can be very useful in this, and you ought to use them in order to come as close to protecting your idea as you possibly can. Okay, when we talk about owning your show, of course, what we're really talking about is owning the copyright in your show, owning the intellectual property rights in your show. So the question is, should you set up a company that's going to own all this and basically is going to be the party that is the producer of your show? And the answer to that is really an easy one. Lawyers usually give you the on the one hand, on the other hand. There is no other hand on this one. Yes, you should set up a company. Now, you should set up a company for a number of reasons, one of which is the same reason why everybody sets up a limited liability entity. And when we're talking about that, we're talking basically about a corporation or a limited liability company, otherwise known as an LLC. And those are the two major types of limited liability entities. And usually we recommend the LLC because it's a little less complex to maintain over time. But whether you do one or the other is less important than that you do one or the other, because you will then have limitation of liability of your company, of your idea, all the way through, and your personal assets will not be subject to anything that may go wrong in the program production process. For example, you're shooting in a location and you've got hot lights. Someone bumps into the light falls, it injures somebody terribly, and someone is badly burned. Now, there's going to be a lawsuit or two as a result of that. They're going to try to find everyone they can who's got any kind of deep pocket to pay for the horrible experience that this burn victim has gone through. And you want them to be able to sue just your company and to get their liability out of your company's assets rather than yours. You're going to have a separate bank account for your company once you've set it up. You're going to get a tax number for it, which applies whether or not you ever have any employees. And you're then going to set up your own bank account and let them try to get their recovery from the company's accounts, not from your personal account, not from your personal automobile, not from your spouse's or beloved other ones' jewelry or what have you. It's going to be the company's responsibility. The second reason to do this, aside from protecting your personal assets, is that something with an LLC or an Inc. behind it just seems more professional. If it's John Smith, it seems like it's, sort of a homemade kind of program idea and a program concept. If it's Smith LLC or Smith Productions LLC, it gives a whole different impression the first time someone sees it. This is a producer, this is a production company. So one of the first things you should do as soon as you do have some investment money, and again, I'm thinking mid 6 figures for you, 5 figures, mid 5 figures, 30, 50,000, something like that. As soon as you've got that ready to go, you should set up a company, set up a bank account with that money in it, and then you're ready to roll as Smith Productions LLC. Okay, so should you produce a sizzle reel, which is a sort of a compendium of moments from what you think you want to produce? That'll be a 3 to 5 minute maybe reel with fast moving cuts and all that stuff that do show your personalities, though. That's very important. Don't forget that. They've got to love your people to love your series. So should I produce a 3 to 5 minute sizzle reel on, maybe $5,000? Or should I go to a full-length pilot, which is going to cost me that $30,000 or $50,000 that you've got in the bank? Is going to be a full 22-minute for commercial, or 44 or 45 minutes if it's going to be an hour of television time. Or these days, because it may be a web series, it could be almost any period of time that works for you and that you think you can keep the audience interest for. So which should you do? I will tell you that these days in television, almost no one watches a full-length pilot. In other words, the last 40 minutes or so of what you produce in your pilot is going to be wasted money, wasted effort, wasted time. Because TV executives and other producers that you're going to be coming to, you have to stay tuned for that part, are busy people. And when I was running the PBS program department, for example, and we got a proposal for something, we would put it on the machine. In those days, it was videotape. It wasn't just all digital. And I guess that was digital too, but it was magnetic. Anyway, you put the tape in the machine, and then in our creative meetings at the PBS network, we would have a tradition where we all had a glass of water in front of us. It was water. At PBS, we couldn't afford anything else. So it was a glass of water in front of us, and everyone would have, a fork or a knife or something also. And the first person to get sick of what he was watching would start banging the glass. Ding, 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 ding. And gradually there'd be more ding, ding, dings. And finally, as the guy running the meeting, I would say, okay, I guess we've had enough of this. And so we turn it off. And at that point, everybody would say, well, I loved it or I hated it. They almost never wanted more. So my advice to you is don't try to make them sit there for 40 minutes. give them something that really has impact for 4 or 5 minutes, but does show the personalities that are involved and does give them the idea of what your concept is. Also, you've got to make sure that when you produce this, it's submitted for copyright for sure. That's a copyrightable element, either one. So my advice to you is forget the full-length pilot, go with something cheaper, keep some of that money for what we're about to get to, which is how to evaluate your pilot or your sizzle reel, and go from there. Now, for those of you who don't know what a focus group is, it's basically a group of people that's demographically selected by experts in the field who will actually run your focus group to be a cross-section of whatever you think your audience is going to be. I mean, if your target networks, for example, tend to attract more female viewers, then the demographic they're going to be looking for is female viewers of a certain age, blah, 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 blah. And they're going to bring them together in a room at some point and play for them all or portions of your sizzle reel, or if you do more than a sizzle reel, despite my advice not to, your pilot. Now, they're going to have a real-time evaluation of how this group of demographically selected people in this hermetically sealed environment are liking or not liking bits and pieces of your sizzle reel. You want to know, for example, whether when the person that you think is going to be your hot personality shows up on the screen, whether the likes, the preferences of the focus group go up or down. Do they like this person? Do they like this sizzle reel better because this person's on the air? And if that person leaves, do they then go down? Their likes go down. So the question becomes whether you want to pay $10,000 or $15,000 per shot, because sometimes you need more than one focus group, and whether you're able to pay that. This is one of the reasons why I'm saying you need a bank account for the company that's going to be responsible, because you have to be flexible enough to pull one of these groups together if you think you need it to make your proposal to a network, or as we're going to discuss in a minute, to a professional producer who's worked for your networks. Your pitch to them is going to include this focus group material, particularly if it's favorable, of course. If it's not favorable, I suppose it'll never see the light of day and you have to go to a new sizzle reel or a new group. But the point is that it is an impressive piece of data for a network or for a co-producer to look at to decide on whether, well, is this going to have appeal or isn't it in the real world? Okay, first I'm going to tell you what not to do, what doesn't make any sense. Sending out sort of a shotgun of your proposal to the networks you think are good for your reality show is not the way to proceed. The networks will typically either not even open the envelope that comes to them unsolicited and send it back to you, or they will open it and say, send this guy, or they will send you a contract. And the contract will basically say, we'll look at your proposal and we'll consider your ideas so long as you understand that we may have the same idea in the back room in our network already. And therefore, if you see something like your idea, it's not an infringement by us. So you're basically giving up your idea totally, financially, creatively, and every other way. And you don't want to sign that document. So that's what not to do. Because if you come in as an amateur producer, let me put this in other terms, and I apologize to all the non-baseball fans out there. I know that it's a waning audience, but I still like baseball. So if I showed up at a baseball training camp in February and said to whoever's in charge of the tryouts, hey, listen, I just want you to know, yes, I don't have a 95-mile-an-hour fastball, but I've got a pitch. I've got a pitch that is impossible to hit. And all you need to do is watch me out on the mound for 20 minutes or so, and you'll see that even your best 300 hitters are completely helpless against this pitch. I'm going to be able to pitch no hitters from here to Sunday. Now, I'm a little old for a tryout, for a professional baseball team, and I've never played baseball professionally, or, well, as a kid, sure, but never played professional baseball. Do you think that they're actually going to put me on the mound and try me out? Of course not. And you, as a first-time producer, as someone who's got no track record in this field, and again, I emphasize, it ain't easy to make TV. You may think it is, but it's not. So as a first-time producer, why would I ever want to open your envelope and let you run a series for me when you've never done it before? So this is all to say you won't get any traction by sending your proposal out to 45 different networks, thinking that someone's going to open the envelope, look at it, say, this is a great idea, sign this kid up, and let's produce this series. That's not going to be the way it happens. Here is the way that it can happen for you. There are producers who are not employed by the networks. The networks don't usually have their own large production staffs. They may have an executive who's the executive producer of each series, but they don't produce in-house by and large. They've got producers out there that they contract with to make their series. Those producers come to them with new ideas. Those are the producers you need to identify. So let's say you've got you've got 3 target networks. You want to do a little research online. Find out what their hit reality series have been and are being currently. Find out who the production companies are for those series, particularly if you find a production company who shows up more than once, because those are the people that the network, that particular network that's been using them, obviously trusts because they've gone back to them, usually because they've been successful, obviously. So you want to find out who those production companies are, and then isolate those that seem to pop up more often than others, and then give a call to them. Start by giving them a call. If they're the kind of production house that says, well, we never look at anything from the outside, then cross them off your list. But a surprising number of them may be willing, unlike the networks themselves, to look at your proposal and not send you one of these obnoxious agreements, which basically says give up all your rights. If they're interested enough, and you do have them sign an NDA because you need to protect yourself to some extent. And you do want to point out in your letter that conveys the NDA that it's a series that you've already registered with the Copyright Office, and that you have this sizzle reel that you've also registered with the Copyright Office. And so there's some ownership already involved. That'll make them less tempted to try to steal anything which is uniquely powerful in what your series is. So those are the people you want to identify. You want to talk to someone on the phone. Make sure that you don't come away feeling that you got to take a shower after you talk with this person. This is something I call the shower test, and those of you who've watched other videos may have heard about it. But there are a lot of people who are sort of smarmy in all the entertainment categories, and television is no exception. So after you have this discussion and you think you don't trust this person, cross them off your list. But if you have the kind of discussion that seems to say, here's a professional who knows what he or she or it is doing as a company, they've had success with one of my target networks, or maybe all 3 or 4 of my target networks, I'm going to send them an NDA and this cover letter that says I've got copyright protection for what I want to do, and see if they're interested. Now, if they're interested, what I'm going to enter into with them is going to be a co-production agreement of one kind or another, sometimes just called a shopping agreement, where they want the right for 6 months or a year to shop it around to the networks. Remember, the networks already trust them. The networks will give them a pitch meeting. By the way, one of the things you could try to get in your contract is a guarantee, or as much as you can get of a guarantee, that you can be present at the pitch meetings, because that's the kind of thing you'll learn. And so you'll be better prepared for one when you do your second series, after this first series is a huge hit, right? So you want to be educated in the process as well. So you'll sign some sort of agreement with them. It'll usually be something like a 50-50 revenue split, because that's what they're in the business to do, is to make money. You will have to give up a huge chunk of creative control even at this point, because remember, they know what they're doing. They know what XYZ network wants. and they're going to actually take your idea and run with it. And they need to be able to make those changes which they think will make it even more appealing to whomever they're going to pitch it to. So it's not a problem. It's not giving something away which you're ever going to be able to maintain, because as a first-time producer, you are not going to be trusted either on the revenue side, on the creative side, or just on the sort of process side. After all, you're talking about a network advertising the upcoming wonderful series and making sure that you're actually going to be able to deliver episodes on time so that they can screen them, so that they can make sure that they can run them. And again, that won't happen unless they trust you. So you do have to give some leeway. You have to give sort of senior status, even if you're 50-50 on the revenue, to this producer that you find. That's the way to get the pitch meeting. That's the way to get in front of these executives. Go with someone who's already a trusted producer. Now, this is one of the most difficult things for me as a lawyer to sell to my clients. And I don't mean that I'm in favor of one thing or another. I just mean that this is a reality. And the reality is that you're not going to be able to exercise creative control all the way from your first concept, your first idea, the first thing in your head, the first thing that you wrote down, through your sizzle reel. You may be able to have creative control to that point, but you will not be able to have creative control once you're involved with producers and networks that actually have to carry this thing out and get this thing on the air. They simply will not trust a first-time producer to have creative control or financial control or administrative control over a series. So again, as difficult as it will be for you, because it's sort of like giving up control over your kid, although we all do, don't we, when we take them to kindergarten or preschool? I mean, if you think about it, you suddenly have another adult or set of adults and a bunch of other kids that are having an influence on your kid. That's the way it's going to be with your first series as well. You're not going to get rich on your first series. You may get rich on your second if your first one is a hit series. More importantly, if you get on the air with your first series, you get a credit that says you've been a co-producer or an executive producer or whatever credit you can get out of it, because credits are hugely valuable currency in the world of TV and film. You want to be on something called International Movie Database eventually as the executive producer or what have you of this series, and that will give you the credential to go forward next time and maybe sort of shall I say, clear your way from your next concept to your next series on the air. Now, assuming that all that we've talked about before has gone swimmingly, so that you had your pitch meeting, you've been in the pitch meeting, you've learned something, the producer that you're co-producing with is excited about your series. Yes, they've made some cuts and deletions and additions and things like that to your creative idea, but it's gotten better, at least in the view of the network that you're pitching to. And you now have something which the network wants. Now, there are sort of two kinds of deals you may then be facing. One is where the network says, okay, we want your series. We want to buy it lock, stock, and barrel. Here's 50,000, 100,000 more, whatever the number is. You will not own it anymore. Now, that's got the appeal because we could all use an extra 5 or 6 figure amount in our checking and banking accounts, I suppose. Well, I know it. And so that's something that will be appealing to you. But let me talk a little bit about the licensing deal. The licensing deal will say something like, well, we've got exclusive rights worldwide or in the US or what have you, probably worldwide these days because these series get used around the world. We got it for 3 years or what have you, says the network. And after that, it goes back to you. You've got it. We maintain X percent of a revenue share, maybe not. Those are all negotiable items, but it's your control thereafter. Now, what that gives you is the right to what's called syndicating it. If you really want to get rich, the best way to get rich, there are two great ways to get rich. Do a hit piece of music, because that's universal, or do a series like Seinfeld or Sesame Street or what have you, that's going to get translated into a million different into 100 different languages and get run in 100 different countries through what are called licensing deals. You'll have the right then to license it because the intellectual property rights have gone back to you. So think twice about whether you need that upfront buyout amount or whether you'd like to negotiate for a licensing deal if you can. Again, as a first-time producer, be aware that your leverage is limited. It is increased by whatever your co-producer can bring to the table, so that if your co-producer is a 3- and 4-time hit maker for the network, your leverage will be somewhat increased because now you're talking, he's talking for you. Your producer, your co-producer is talking for you and talking for the concept. So it's increased, but still don't expect that you're going to have all that many choices that you can make or that you can impose on the network you want or networks you want at this point. So be realistic about what the chances are for you. Even better if you come to us and you've made sure that all your ownership documents are good. At ChaseLawyers, for example, one of the things we do for film and TV producers is make sure their chain of title in the intellectual property is very clear. And the way to do that is to use certain documents that say that even though other people are doing a lot of the work for you, they're doing it for you, and they're doing it in the knowledge that as soon as they've done the work, it's going to be owned by you, not by them. Because the Copyright Act otherwise would say that whoever creates something, whether it's a logo or whatever else, owns it, owns the design. So you want to make sure that your logo designer, your website designer, what have you, everybody who's done anything for the series has done so in a way which leaves you with the ownership of the product they create. So give us a call at ChaseLawyers. We'll be happy to talk to you for a few minutes gratis about this or really any other topic. And if you need us, we'll be happy to be retained by you, and we'll go down this path together happily and we hope successfully.
So if you like this video, hit the thumbs up button below and let us know. Also, you can subscribe to the ChaseLawyers YouTube channel for more legal tips for those in the entertainment industry like yourself. And if you have other topics you want us to cover, please let us know in your comments below so that we can help you out in that way too. See you soon.